That was
Come
wrong,
on,
so.
couldn't catch us, it's coming
Yeah.
up.
Oh, that's the knock.
I-
That was the door, so.
There's one
go ahead.
place down next to the front door where
Good evening. I'd like to call
tree
to order
roots have been raised in the corner around them.
March 27th, 2019 meeting of the
Yeah.
Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission and begin with item 1, which is approval of the minutes from the March 13th meeting. Do I have any additions, corrections, deletions for the minutes? Is there
Good.
a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Dennis, second. Scott. Thank you, Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Item 2, this is designated for public comment, and the time limit is 15 minutes, where we set aside time for members of the public to speak to us regarding matters not on our agenda nor currently before us. Is there anybody out there? Would you like to speak? No? Okay. It's just a reminder to anybody who might be listening that this is an opportunity to come tell us what's on your mind or ask us questions if it's not on our agenda. Item 3, our commission budget, and Mike Ray will probably go over that.
Yeah, this is just, we need to get our budget request in for fiscal year 2020. And this is what we've typically submitted in the past, $1,500, typically towards professional development for the commission. I think last year we had spent, not all of it, we just spent a portion of it on the spring planning conference that was held down here in Moscow that year. So that's where we used quite a bit of those funds last year. So it's been $1,500 for the last as long as I can remember, and we haven't moved it one way or the other. But every year we talk about, maybe bringing somebody in to talk to us or reaching out and doing some other professional development. There's a number of conferences that happen every year, and we could certainly look at sending a few people to those too.
I know that the Urban Morphology Conference is going to be in Salt Lake City in the fall of 2020, and I'll have my expenses paid to it, but it might be of interest for somebody to go. Or what other, you're thinking more the Idaho Planning Association Conference or Inland Empire?
Yeah, that one will be down in Twin Falls this year, so that's usually in the first to second week in October. It's in the fall. And then the Priest Lake Conference, which is the Inland Empire, Eastern Washington chapter of the American Planning Association. It's at Priest Lake every year.
And it's right before Memorial Day, from what I remember, isn't it?
It is. It's right, I think, after Memorial Day. So it's
They've changed it then.
it's either right before or right after. I thought it was usually the 1st of June, but maybe not. Maybe it's in
Yeah, when I participated, it used to be right the
Right
week
before
before they
then.
opened the
Okay.
resort. Yeah, so
Then
I don't
that's
know.
it. Yeah, then that's it.
So, but anyway, that's a good one. I guess my question is, how close have we come to spending the budget as it stands, and how close have we come to needing more?
We haven't come very close at all. I mean, I think the registration for the Idaho APA conference, when we had the spring mini conference, was, $30.
Yeah, and there was no
a handful
travel
of
or
people.
anything,
So,
yeah.
so it wasn't very much money at all.
Yeah, so, okay. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
The whole deal seems to be that P&Z has such good staff support that, people there are other commissions that don't have the kind of bite that planning and zoning has, and so then in order to do anything they need money. We have a better, somehow the budget thing doesn't seem to affect us, because we've got Michael, he can take care of everything.
I will say from firsthand experience that the Priest Lake Conference, the Inland Empire one, is really nice. It depends on what the themes are and how relevant they are to what we're working on. If you could kind of give us a sense, I guess we're talking about 2020, not 2019, so.
Well, we have that money
like
for this year too, so it's $1,500, but
yeah.
it's really inexpensive. I mean, I think that the whole package is just slightly under $300, and that includes, I think, a couple nights lodging in one of the cabins, and then all the meals are paid for, and then there's pretty much 2 days worth of sessions. that are, you know, you get a lot of people from the west side, so Western Washington that come over. I mean, it is Eastern Washington chapter of APA, but you get a mixture. You get some North Idaho planners and some other folks, and then you have Eastern Washington contingent, and then you get a number of speakers from Western Washington. They usually talk about some really neat, kind of innovative ideas and things that they're working on.
So if you could let us know, you know, once they
Yeah.
have information posted,
Sure.
we can decide if anybody wants to go.
Okay.
That seems like an opportunity anyway, yeah, great.
I guess I move that we request the same budget as in previous years.
Is there a second? Thank you, Joel.
I'll second.
A second, thank you, Dennis. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Moving on. Review of proposed changes to the mobile park and RV park ordinances, and Mike will
Okay.
update us on that.
Take one and pass it. So this is just, I think last time we talked about the proposed changes that we had anticipated within the 3 different ordinances. We have the new manufactured home park section, we have the existing manufactured home park section, and then we have the RV park chapter as well. And so we talked about last time about combining the new and the existing manufactured mobile home park chapters together. Since they were confusing, you couldn't really tell the difference between one and the other. And then we needed to go through and add some definitions. So I've got an ordinance. It's not complete yet. When we started going through this, actually it's really old. It's from like the early 80s, and a lot of the references at the very end are for ordinances that were passed in the 70s. So it ended up being quite a bit more work as far, you know, just looking at how they wrote it back then. And you just really need to convert a lot of the language into language that we use today in ordinances. And so it's still a work in progress, but I figured I'd pass it out to give you an idea of where we're going. But you know, you open it up to the second page, and so we're starting to add the definitions that we talked about. So manufactured home on page 2, that's the state definition. And so previously this just covered mobile homes. That was the terminology that they used throughout the whole ordinance was mobile homes. And so we talked about last time the difference between a mobile home and a manufactured home, and it all had to do with when it was built. Prior to June 15th, 76, it's a mobile home. After June 15th, 1976, it's a manufactured home. So we talked about those two idiosyncrasies with the definitions. So we're going to have to add both of them. So we just ended up adding the state definition of both a mobile home and a manufactured home, and just struck the mobile home definitions that we currently had within the chapter. And then the manufactured home park, I think we just relocated that, but it's the same definition really. It was mobile home park, and so we just changed that to manufactured home park. And we talked about allowing more tiny home type structures, and that was defined as a modular home per Division of Building Safety. So that's on page 3, the definition of a modular home, which is a state definition. So it's a state statute.
Michael, go back to the, help me out on the manufactured home versus mobile home. Okay, I get that date, but don't you want to tell us what the difference is beside the date?
Well,
In other words, what happened in 1976? Did somebody invent the wheel or something?
I think probably the and I'm just venturing to guess, the bigger thing that happened was HUD started inspecting and certifying them in 76. So
The
prior to
construction
that, they
standard.
didn't, and it was the HUD construction standards that happened at that point.
So better insulation.
Prior to
that kind of thing?
76, a lot of them had aluminum wiring, which was one of the bigger problems.
So kind of like the FAA, all of a sudden somebody wanted to look at it and see if we were protecting people. Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's really what happened.
Right.
And then, you know, you can move a mobile home into a manufactured home park now, but you have to rehabilitate it. So like all the ones like that were out in
Okay.
Syringa, they were
Sure,
already there
sure.
and they were grandfathered in. But if you pick it up and you move it to a new park, then it has to be rehabilitated. Some just depending upon how it was constructed.
That's probably why some of the folks, I have a few friends who were out at Syringa, and they don't seem to be able to explain it to me, but I'm beginning to see that they couldn't move their home because
Right.
there were things in that home
The
that
value to
were no
upgrade
longer
them, right.
allowed, yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't think people out there always understood that, but they, because I would just say, well, why don't you just put some wheels back on your, and tow it over? Well, they couldn't say why, and I can see that point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cost of transport
Sure,
is part of it, and then the cost of rehabbing it to HUD standards. And it all depends on when it was built prior to '76. Some of them are fairly easy, some of them are quite a bit tougher
Yeah.
to
Well, I
rehab.
know a couple of people that I've known out at, that had to move from Syringa, probably didn't have $400 or $500 loose change
Yeah.
to even be able to move something. It's possible that
Yeah.
would be.
I mean, and then it's just the lifespan of a structure like that. I mean, it's getting up to be 50-plus years.
Right.
And, you know, have some homes that won't, you know, will start to deteriorate at that point. So, I mean, that's
Okay,
part of
thanks.
it.
So the
Is-
concept of mobile doesn't really figure in it. All of them move. I mean, essentially, it's just really just the standards that they meet in terms of construction.
That's the only
Yeah.
difference, is
Yeah.
just, when they were constructed.
That's
really.
good.
Is every owner going to know the exact date on which their home was manufactured?
Yeah, it's like a car. It'll have like
Is it-
a serial number, and it'll have that date on there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think will the parks be changing their names to manufactured home parks instead of mobile home park, or does that just not even matter?
Well, a lot of the newer ones call themselves manufactured home
Okay.
parks. It's just all the old ones that we have were typically referred to as mobile home parks. But I think that that's what we're proposing to do, just because our codes were from the late '70s, early '80s, and they called them mobile home parks, and really they're manufactured home parks is what they should be referred to as.
So
So.
where does the RV fall into this?
Good question.
The RV, well, so we have these changes, and so we have all three chapters wrapped into this ordinance. The RV section is at the very end, starts on, kind of look at the footer down there to,
It looks
it
like
says, it's labeled RV and mobile home parks amended. Oops. Actually, it doesn't change. But it starts on, it's like page 13.
Oh, there it is, responsibility of the recreational vehicle park. Yeah, it starts
Yeah.
on page 18. Oh, maybe before that?
13.
Oh, 13, yeah.
So really, I think the only change that we needed to make in the RV chapter, so we updated, just going through a few of these things, like previously, you know, if you're going for a new RV park, it used to be that we required 5 hard complete sets. We've pretty much gone electronic now, and so we just require 1 paper copy with 1 digital copy in PDF. So it's updating it to that, but I think the only real change that we've identified is just on page 18, and that's what we talked about with the length of stay in RV parks. So we were going to strike the language that talked about the 6-month period or the 180-day period. And there is another section there, and I kept it for now, but it's, so it was subsection B, that 4-16, the length of stay of the RV parks. And it refers to the length of stay for people camping and then people that don't have total hookups, how long they can stay. And it's at 14 days. It just seemed reasonable to keep that if you're camping or you don't have, you know, you're self-contained, don't have any ability to connect to the system there. Figure we just keep that alone, because most of the ones are, have the ability to hook up to sewer, water, electricity.
So what is the length of stay for one with hookups?
We just eliminated it,
Eliminated.
so there's no, yeah.
So, here's a question though, are we entering into, let's say I owned an RV park and I could go buy an RV park, or an RV for $5,000. And now I'm creating permanent housing with something that maybe we shouldn't be.
You think you
Permanent
can't buy
housing.
a thing with a toilet in it for $5,000?
Oh, I think you could, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Can you?
Oh, yeah.
$5,000?
Yep.
That's
why I sold mine for.
That
I
would,
got rid of
that
it.
would have hookups, everything else, but are we just opening the door for,
Well, their answer to that, when I asked that same kind of question, was they're putting the responsibility on the park owner, not to. I mean, he doesn't want anything like that in there as well, is what. I mean, it wouldn't be good business to let something like that come in there and stay that doesn't.
well, but
But it's
we've seen
still
parks,
open.
we've seen parks before
And they
that
need to make
the
money.
money drives
Yeah, that was
the
my point,
decision.
but that's,
You know,
that was
like
right.
I say, you could go buy a $5,000
absolutely.
motorhome and all of a
Yeah,
sudden have a
100%.
rental.
yeah.
That, and I'm not sure what codes drive an RV versus a manufactured home for life safety.
Or do we get back in the trap of it being more like a mobile home pre-1976?
Well,
Yeah.
as far as building codes, I mean, I think you're just required to have a license to the DMV.
Right.
I don't know that it has to
Yeah.
be certified that it was constructed to a, certain standard. It's just, that has to be licensed to be highway worthy,
Yeah, it's
to
just-
be
yeah,
towed
exactly.
around.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's my only concern is that, you could go buy day in and day out inexpensive
You could actually probably buy
RVs.
them less for that.
Yeah.
Than put the toilet in and get in there.
so that's the question. So we had, Gary Lester request this to eliminate that 6-month limitation.
So should there be a size? Should there be, in other words, are there?
I don't know.
What
I
you're
mean-
talking about, the 5,000 thing, could that be?
Well, my thing was you have these mobile homes that are in place that are like, they're living in like a mobile home park. And then you're gonna have a $2,500 or a $5,000 camper come next to you and live. Feasibly, I mean, that could happen for however long.
Well, Mike, didn't you say that the RVs to go in the manufactured home parks have to have a CUP? So we have some control over that?
Yeah, in the mobile home parks, it's just like what Gary had requested and P&Z approved. You request to have, essentially apply for an RV park to have that incorporated in a mobile manufactured home park. So that's what he requested, and he requested a number of spaces to be designated towards RVs. And mainly because a lot of the older mobile home park, manufactured home parks, they don't meet the size requirements of new manufactured homes. Like the spots are really small, especially on his eastern loop. And so that's why he had requested to have RVs. So we'd allowed him to have RVs intermingled in his mobile home park. And now he's come back and requested that the 6-month limitation be lifted as well in order to allow more permanent occupancy of those RVs.
So let's say we get an owner who's not like Gary, an owner who doesn't care. What are our safeguards? I mean, they have to use the CUP, correct? Do we have enough standards to control that?
Do we review every plat of a mobile home park, or manufactured home park, presenting sites for RVs? Do we get that opportunity for oversight in that way?
Any new mobile home park, manufactured home park, or RV park that comes in, it'd have to be approved by the commission.
So there's some oversight that maybe at least the sites are concentrated, or potentially so that you don't have the problem, that quite as much of a problem. I don't know, I'm just,
I guess my only concern is you have 10 spaces open you could go and fill 10 spaces for not a lot of money. And let's face it, Moscow's expensive to live in. You could rent out 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom or 1-room RVs for more than your investment. So, I mean, are we setting the table for maybe some housing and housing standards that we don't want? That, you know, life safety is an issue. Who inspects to see if the smoke, you know, at least with the manufactured homes, there's an inspection process. There isn't with an RV.
And could there be a requirement of owner occupancy too? I mean, would that
Right.
help to
Right, exactly.
alleviate the problem you're talking about? I don't know, that's what we did with
Well, I
ADUs.
keep going back to some size. In other words, when we talk about some tiny houses or accessible, or the little dwellings that we've
ADUs,
ADUs, you know, we've said, okay, 600 square feet, and it just seems to me that it may be, well, it's what goes through my head with these RVs are these big things that cost $200,000 and have all manner of bedrooms are shown out, and they're fancier than many of the manufactured homes, but you're suggesting there's a smaller kind of
You
a
can
unit.
get an 18-footer with a bathroom that has full hookups.
So I'm thinking we ought to look at maybe a size thing. In other words, if the on-wheel unit, the RV unit, somebody that's there are these RV people, of course, that live. They've given up their houses. They just live on the road. They really it's a lifestyle, and they have these fancy homes. And if one of those big fancy rigs is next to you, you probably don't feel bad about it. But if it's something that's really less than,
Well, you know, everybody has their taste and their abilities, but, you know, and maybe it's the owner occupied that is the hinge pin.
That
you know.
it
I
doesn't
mean,
turn into really
you don't
cheap
want somebody to
abused
go in
rental
and just go
Yeah.
buy some
Yeah.
really cheap housing thinking they could rent it for.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, when
I
there's
mean-
no inspection or
Right,
assurance that's a
exactly,
safe
you know.
dwelling.
it's a good point.
Well, and that's been
Yeah.
the challenge for us too, is, I mean, we've got the 6-month limitation on them now, but we really never know when they come in and go out, because, you know, a manufactured home, they're required to get a set permit, they gotta
Right.
go secure, you know, make sure it's secured to the ground, skirted, connected, and you get inspections for all that work that's done, and so we know when those come in. But for RVs, I mean, they're so transient that they come in, go out, and we really never know when to start the clock on the 6-month.
Right.
And so that, you know, that's kind of on our end has just been a challenge, just because really the 6-month limit is really unenforceable for us, just because we don't know
There's no
when
mechanism
they
to
come and go.
monitor that.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess owner occupancy, I think, is.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Would-
because
would
we did that
help,
with
yeah.
ADUs and tied it to owner occupancy, and I think it
Yeah,
it
yeah.
provides a
I like that.
And then we,
control.
you know, we talked about maybe drawing a distinction between RVs and manufactured home parks that are allowed to intermingle, or just the straight RV park. You know, should there be a difference there with the 6-month, or?
So
or
a
not?
subset within, yeah.
I mean, because we could divide it out
Yeah.
that way, if it's as, you know, RVs that are as a component of a mobile home park or manufactured home park, then, you know, maybe they don't have a limitation. But if you have a RV park, then maybe you still have the 6-month limitation.
And what about some kind of percentage allowable of RV spaces within the manufactured home park?
Yeah, discussed that briefly too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I think, what we were leaning to initially.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, it's, that's, I guess, the main concern that we've always had is with this proposal is just the aesthetics of it and what somebody would, are willing to bring in there and live in. But you go around to a lot of these parks already, and I don't know that it would be any worse, or, maybe an improvement to, Loney's Park there on Brent. And there's some parks that are in pretty rough shape.
I'm all for extending the stay because, there's a lot of construction in this area and these folks are living for more than 6 months. It's just, how do you not have an owner go out and find some inexpensive housing to rent out?
Sure.
Is my concern.
So, if we put
Prohibit rentals.
if we put the owner, if we put the owner occupancy on it, then that'd be a way
At least for RVs.
to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I like.
Well, but I wonder how many people, let's say over in the Robinson, the one on Alman, I wonder how many of those units are just being rented by somebody and not owner occupied. I think you can go and rent a place there.
I think the majority of them are owner.
Huh?
I think the majority of them are owner.
Do you?
Yeah.
But I think those again are manufactured housing.
They used to not allow renting. They had to be owner occupied. That may have changed. And there were also people that did it without anybody knowing.
But even so, they're all mobile homes, so
At
they're,
least
They have to meet a standard
Yeah,
there's
that an
some-
RV doesn't have to meet. So having at least an RV that somebody has some interest in maintaining, which would be an owner-occupied one, to me makes sense, but if we're going to allow it.
Yeah,
I like it.
makes sense to me. Any other thoughts?
Well, it just seemed to me, I go back so far, I can think of days when I was in university. I had friends who, that's where they lived. They went and found a trailer and rented it. And I don't know whether it was against the law or not against the law, but I know it happens.
Well, look at where Identity was, Charlie Bond's apartments. Those I remember as being trailers, RV trailers converted to permanent living.
Yeah, and if you go through any of the parks now, Robinson, no, but, I think Gary's had a couple in there, and they call them park models, but they're essentially RVs. So for a while there was, it was kind of up in the air. They didn't really know what to classify those as because they're essentially RVs, but they were a little bit larger, and they call them park models. And it was, I think, meant to be lived in a mobile home park. But state ended up clarifying that with the last legislative session to say that they are RVs. But if you go out there, they look like RVs. It looks like a fifth wheel, like your tow behind setup. And so you do, you have some out there that are pre-existing that have been there for a while, and you see some that are skirted.
So are we going to create a bottleneck for some that are not owner occupied? And if they're classed as RVs?
Oh, yeah, good question.
Some of the existing ones?
Yes.
you mean? I would say that those are probably owner occupied, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But there's only a couple. It's not like a certain percentage of the park's covered with them. It's only, maybe one or two that I've seen. So I think it's fairly minimal.
So it seems in line with Gary's request. He has clients who move in with their RV. They can only stay 6 months, so they have to pick up and leave. Well, presumably they own that RV to do it,
Yeah.
to bring it there in the
Yeah.
first place. So, not allowing that to turn into rental property, I think, is really important.
Okay.
So,
Well, I can work on incorporating that in here, and then I'll continue to work on the changes to the other sections. But go ahead and take a look through it and see if there's anything in there that you see that's an issue or catches your attention. But I imagine that there'll still be quite a bit that we'll go through and change just to update it. So.
great. So what's our schedule on it, do you think?
Well, I'll just go and see if I incorporate those changes and bring it back next meeting, and
Then we
we'll
might
talk about
public
it.
hearing in
Yeah, I think maybe a review next meeting and then maybe one more review before
Okay.
we.
So we're talking probably
Make
May.
sure we're comfortable with it and then go forward.
So the blue is what you added here and also what you crossed out?
Yeah, correct. Those are all mine. All the red is just what we got from the legal department. So they like to go through and add
Okay.
legalese to it. So a lot of the numbers, they like to spell out. So that's all,
All this you're planning on getting rid of?
that's all Patty's. Yeah,
Okay.
yep, yep.
Is that all for that item?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to item 5, subdivision net density review.
Okay. So where we left last time, we were talking about the different types of subdivisions. So we had the cluster and traditional subdivisions. And I'd come up with this is more of a matrix, a chart that we had formatted similar to what we had done before with our bulk and dimensional standards. So it included lot area, lot width, setbacks, required open space, and then we introduced kind of an effective maximum net density, the number of units per acre that you're able to achieve with that type of development or subdivision, and then building height. And so we were going through, and I think that we talked about, so for cluster subdivisions, we had taken really a percentage off of the minimum lot area. So you're looking at maybe R1 is 9,800 or 9,600 right now, R2 7,000. So we took about 30% off of the total lot area with cluster subdivisions. Same with lot width. So R1 is 80 feet right now. It went down to 50. R2, I believe, is 70. Went down to 45, and so on. And then setbacks, reduced those by about 5 feet all the way around as well. Common open space. So in order to achieve these lot sizes that are substantially less than the normal that's required, the common open space, I think for a baseline, we just took what we currently require. So it depends on what zone you're in, will require the amount of parkland dedication. So we're looking at open space now, but we took those parkland dedication numbers and essentially just doubled those. And so this is what we were coming up with, and seeing where that fell and whether or not that made sense, and then looking at the net density. And it's kind of hard to visualize what net density looks like on the ground. You have these numbers and you have corresponding minimum lot area, but it's hard to really tell what that looks like in different developments. So that's the feedback we got last time, was to go over some examples throughout town. And there was a publication that we put together in 2010, and I just went through that and really updated it to current development, and I added minimum lot area, or I guess minimum lot area, maximum lot area of lots within the development, and then average lot area. So we'll just go through all these developments and just kind of have a little study of what density looks like.
Before you go there, the table that you had there had common open space.
Uh-huh.
Is it intended that include parkland? And I guess my question
In
is,
lieu of, you mean?
with what is the ownership of the common open space
Yeah.
and access, public access?
Okay. Yeah, it's intended that that really be public access, I think. But it's essentially in order to replace the parkland dedication.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think they'd be really one and the same. I mean, you'd have parkland dedication and open space, which are similar, but I think that the open space is more of just natural areas.
Right.
It maybe pass through them. Parkland, typical parkland that we develop is sod. I mean, there are some natural parks in town, but the typical park is a play structure, depending upon the size, and then other amenities, bathrooms and things like that. What we're envisioning here is more of just a riparian, kind of more of a preserved habitat throughout the subdivision.
But it is intended to be publicly accessible.
I think that's our intent, is to,
Yeah.
looking over at other subdivisions or subdivision ordinances with other jurisdictions. Some of them are private, some of them are public, but I think that in order to, I think it needs to remain open, some type of access to the public. I mean, if there's access through it, be a path, I think that needs to be public access through that.
Mike, how would that, like, fee in lieu of parkland apply to this also? Could a developer say, well, pay to have a reduced requirement of our public open space?
Yeah, I don't think we would make it eligible for a fee in lieu of with this. That's not really the intent.
Because among other things, by doubling the requirement, what I'm hoping is that the dedicated open space isn't just totally undevelopable land that's also inaccessible, like a
hillside or
90%
something, yeah.
slope or something. And that that there's some quality to the open space that has, and I don't know how we build that qualitative dimension into this, but that's something that
Yeah, and
worries
that'll
me a
be,
bit.
well, that'll be something that we'll have to come up with, like we talked about before in Moscow. I mean, we have the floodplain, we have the
Right.
2 100-year floodplains with Paradise Creek and the South Fork of the Palouse. Those are logical for preservation. We have wetlands areas that are associated with those, and we have steep slopes. So,
Right.
it's not, I mean, for parkland, you definitely don't want the steep slope designated
Right.
as your parkland. But we may, maybe we want the steep slope for this type of application, because then we don't have to mass grade all the hills in order to put development on it. And so that's just, what we'll have to come up
Yeah, I see
with.
what you're saying, yeah. I remember one case we had a couple of years ago where there was a super steep slope, and that there was an issue with accommodating sidewalks. I'm trying to remember, you know what I'm talking about? Never mind. I'll remember the name of it. But
Mike,
Townhouses.
Are we limiting the architecture by the building height if we're 50-foot minimum lot width? Let's say we have a 50-foot lot.
I lived in a house for 23 years in Port Russell that's 35 feet tall on a 55-foot wide lot, so I don't think it's an issue personally. But
We talked about this last
Yeah.
time, how this was reduced for the building height, and I think we were gonna bump that back up.
Are you gonna
yeah,
bump?
yeah. I didn't know which way you were coming at the question,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I mean, it just
Yeah.
seems like we're
Yeah.
we're
Right.
limiting what
Yeah.
design features.
Yeah.
I
that-
agree with you on that one, yeah.
So, I just hadn't
yeah.
made those changes. This is what we had last time, but yeah, I think we talked about that, and we're gonna increase the height back up to, I think, what we had it before, so.
Yeah. Good
Well,
question,
and
Scott. Yeah,
it's quite the height of a house, if you've got a steep pitch, is one thing.
right.
And it's another thing if you go up to
Right.
that full height just with a flat roof. So in terms of just how it fits. So I don't know if, I like the idea of bumping the figure back up, but there can be a thought about sill height, or, the height of your floor, the sill, so that you don't have this strange looking a square thing in a residential area that
You mean the
probably
plate-
didn't.
Plate height on the.
Because
yeah.
your house,
We did
for
something with
instance,
ADUs.
might have been 35 feet, but that's a pretty small point way up there in the
Right,
sky.
right, and some of that was the chimney too, but, but it was up there, it was over 30,
Yeah.
well over 30,
Yeah.
so,
So as we go through these, we also have the chart in your packet, so you can kind of just refer to that as we're looking at these densities. But the first one was Christopher's Crossing, and this is out off of Orchard. So these are primarily, I think it's suburban residential is the zone. They're all over an acre in size for these lots, really large homes out here. built in 2000 or platted in 2000. There's 17 units here. It's a little under 19 acres in size. They're all single family. The net density, just to be clear, is we're just counting the lots, the lot areas. The gross density refers to everything. So we've got streets that are in there, and we've got any stormwater. You know, there's no parks that were required as part of this, but those would be included as well in a gross density calculation. And so you'll see as we go through these how much they vary. You know, the gross density is always less because it includes all the streets and parks and all the infrastructure. But just depending upon the number of amenities, the size of the streets, size of the stormwater ponds, things like that, I mean, this number will vary greatly depending upon where you are. The net density is I think, the more accurate number for the development, but it just jumps around so much with the gross, as you see when we go through there. And population density is really just taking the gross number and multiplying it by our average household size in Moscow, which is 2.25.
So it's not number of bedrooms or anything,
No.
yeah, okay. So
It's
based on that.
solely based upon the average household size.
So the
Which
P of
is
people
what is the average?
Yeah.
per acre?
people.
Okay.
2.25.
2.25.
Yeah.
By the looks of it, the people who live in those lots don't know what to do with all that land.
It's natural habitat.
It doesn't look, natural habitat, right? It's a rabbit run. I got it.
Yeah, so just really more rural type single family development. And that's a shot from the road. You know, the streets are more of a rural standard, so they're paved. They don't have any sidewalks. It's more of, at least I guess on the south side of, I think this is Hershey here, has a sidewalk, but mainly just a couple gravel shoulders on either side with a paved roadbed. And so those are the kind of example of what the homes look like out there. And then Pheasant Run, which is just to the north, that was platted in '95. There's only 9 houses there. They're single family, about 9.84 acres. The net density is a little over 1. This is in suburban residential again, so they're large acre-sized lots. And so pretty similar to what we had seen in Christopher's Crossing. So just acre lots with just large homes.
Is that parkland dedication in that one?
It's not parkland, it's, this is the stormwater
Oh, okay,
detention
okay.
for the property.
Okay, yeah.
That's
There's a couple of unbuildable hills in there.
Yeah, they do, yeah. So it's an example of one of the houses. And then Ridgeview Estates Edition. So this is just eastern edge of Moscow. This is Troy Highway. Really, we have it platted as extending through and connecting with Notting Hill, but it hasn't done that yet. It's all platted. They just haven't moved forward with developing it yet, but that's probably in the next couple years. So these are a little bit higher net density, a little bit smaller lots than the Christopher Crossing scenario. So this is built in '87. 26 dwellings within this subdivision, 14 acres. They're single family. The net density is a little over 2.14 dwelling units per acre. Gross is 1.84, and population's 4.14. So it's really just, really more of a suburban single-family development. So you have sidewalks. Sidewalks are just on one side of the street, paved with curb gutter. It's got water, sanitary, storm throughout. And that's an example of, looking up the street, the still larger single-family home looks similar to development east of Mountain View, Rolling Hills area, 6th Street. And there's Rolling Hills 7th Edition. I believe this is intersection of Atani and Panorama, all the way up there at the hill. This is part of Good Sam over here to the east, off of Fairview. And this is your classic R2 development. So throughout the Rolling Hills subdivisions, they're all platted. Essentially everything east of Mountain View is R2 zone. Minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet, and this is traditionally what you get. Is more suburban, sidewalks on both sides of the street, tree lawns, still fairly large homes, but just smaller lot sizes than the typical rural subdivision. So this was 2005, there's 63 contained within this subdivision, 21 acres, single family, and so you see the net density start to increase to 3.68 dwelling units an acre, gross is 2.95, and the population density 6.63. It's a view looking down Atani. I think this is where 6th Street comes in, right here. And Quail Run, second edition. This is to the north of town. Similar, it's an R2 zone, R2 development. And so you've got Franklin, Gambles, a lot of these, there's a larger parcel here that I think one day will eventually be redeveloped, but you have some street stubs that continue here. This was the Clark House, I think is what it was previously called. Polk, North Polk extensions over here.
Okay.
And so this is, like I said, R2 development, a little bit smaller lot sizes than the typical rolling hills, but still in R2. So about the same, 3.76, gross density is 3.35, and population 7.53. That whole area is a little bit smaller, 11 acres. There's 37 dwelling units, and they're all single family in there as well. So you can see just a little bit smaller house sizes than you typically see in the rolling hills subdivisions. And this is the villages. So Southgate 3rd, this is out by the roundabout on White Avenue. It was originally platted, I think, as a larger lot within Southgate 3rd. They went back and replatted it. And I don't know if I don't think they went through a PUD, or maybe they did, to get a little bit smaller lot sizes. But I've started to go back and just, since this was starting to verge more on our traditional neighborhood design, went back and thought it'd be useful to look at the average lot sizes. And I don't have those in the printout that I put in the packet, but I went back over the last few days and added those, so I can send out a revised study. But I think it's good to kind of look at the minimum lot sizes. This area is in primarily a mixture, so it's R4, R3, and R2, and there's a mixture of uses there. Tiempo Commons across the street, which we'll get to, and then Camden Court are all zoned R4, which allows for those smaller lot sizes. But they went through a PUD, and then of course there's a lot of apartment development to the west down White Avenue. So this was established in 2005. There's 22 dwelling units, a little over 5 acres. They're all single family. So the minimum that we see in this development for lot size is 6,000 square feet. So that's the smallest lot. The largest lot is 8,804 square feet, and then the average lot size of this development is about 6,200 square feet. So that comes out to be about 7 dwelling units an acre. Of course, the gross density is quite a bit less, and population density is 9.38. And this is the area. So you've got the roundabout, and then really smaller lot sizes. And they're all traditional, so they have this alley. Although it is a little odd just because the alley is so wide. So if you ever go down that street, the alley is probably about 24 feet wide. Maybe 28 feet wide. It's really wide.
Way wider than I guess.
Some of the
20
streets.
always seemed the max for a alley, so.
Yeah.
How do people feel about it? Do you have any idea? It seems like wide open space when you drive down their alley. You can almost speed down their alley.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is the gross density sort of plays in with the traffic circle would add quite a bit to the gross density, or reduce the density, I should say. Yeah. That
and the wide alleys would add to that, and then White Avenue in this location is an arterial,
Right.
So it's a lot wider of a street. It's got the middle turn lane, the suicide lane, so it's really 3 lanes with that in the middle, the roundabout. So, you know, that's where it jumps around depending upon the location and where it's at, and adjacent to arterials or collectors. It really can
Right.
fluctuate with the gross density.
But it shows also how much street sections really play into the whole.
Play into it, yeah. And so I think that we had an option of either going with net density or gross density. I think that net density is more stable, and I think gross density would oftentimes, it would pit, I think, a developer just trying to get that gross density down, in order to be within the gross density by just really reducing the width of the streets and things like that to try to get the density down under the threshold for gross density. So I think that, the net density is probably the way to go. So that's an example. These are fairly small homes, single-family homes. A lot of them are 1 story. Some kind of have a daylight basement because it drops off. But yeah, kind of cute craftsman style homes. And then McGregor's second. So this is kind of an area south of 6th Street, an older area town. It's platted in 1889, 284 dwelling units. So now we're starting to get a mixture, not just single family, but single family, 2-family, multifamily. It's 56 acres. So looking at the average lot size, so the minimum that we've seen, there are a couple oddities. There's one off of Lynn that's only 1,600 square feet in size. And I don't know how that ever happened, but.
Which block of Lynn?
It's, as soon as it's close to where it turns, and it turns into White Place by the creek down there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
right
down
here.
there,
Yeah, so
yeah.
you see it right there.
Yeah.
But you drive by, it's a really small house, but it sits almost entirely on the parcel that it was.
What's the zone
on.
of this McGregor?
It's,
Is it R3?
yeah, Logan divides it. So everything west of Logan is R4, multifamily, and then everything east of Logan is R3, and then I think it transitions to R2 at Lynn. But yeah, so this is 6th Street here, and you got Adams, Harrison, Logan that goes all the way down, and then 6th, 7th, 8th, Maybell, Kenneth, White Avenue is really White Place with land running all the way
I
up.
think it's interesting that we're edging back. This was developed in 1889, and the villages with 6.9 dwelling units per acre is basically the same density as this. So we seem to be heading back in that direction, which I think is a good moral condition.
Well, it's interesting because if you look, here, look at the lot sizes. So we have that minimum, we have that outlier, the 1,600, but the maximum is really large. It's almost an acre in size.
And that must be for an apartment?
And then the average is 9,300. So if
Yeah,
we
but
went back, to the villages, their average is 6,200. So we still have, there was a lot of this kind of orchards area, I think is what it was called, but you have a lot of these lots that are really deep.
Yeah, they
And
were
they're-
designed
they're-
for
You
having
can see that
farms
big
and
one right
animals
there,
in
yeah.
town.
So like this
Right
one,
there it is.
that's
Yeah.
probably your acre right
That's a
there.
big one.
Yeah.
The acre one. But the way it was
Shocking.
platted, you just have, you have, the classic grid system here with the alleys rear loaded, and then you start to lose that once you get east of Logan. And you start to just have these really long lots that are really deep.
And I
So that-
remember reading somewhere about those being planned for people who wanted to live in town with animals. Like a lot of times they have those little
Yeah,
barns,
And they're,
And,
That beach in Kenneth Street, they have interesting stories to tell.
Yeah.
I remember, we used to have people who lived on Kenneth and Beach who would want to come in, and so you can begin to see that somehow when we got past Logan, all of a sudden we just kind of gave up any rules that we used to live by.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
the alleys went away and every lot was kind of different.
yeah.
Kind of a super democratic deal.
But, you know, I guess the story here is we've got a lot, I mean, there's a little bit larger lots within this area, but the density's around the same, and that's primarily because we've got multifamily. So you add up all the dwelling units that, you know, are intermingled within this area, and so multifamily are these kind of yellowish color, two-family, the duplexes are the blue, and then single-family are the pinkish purple color. So that's really, you know, anytime it increases like that, you have this mixture of uses in these older areas.
There have to be a lot of wild stories about that land east of Logan.
Yeah.
It's really, it's amazingly picturesque.
Well, if you
Just
go
driving
down, yeah, if you go down 7th, once you get past Lind, you'll notice that there's a lot of they start to get some increase in size, a lot of the homes, and then they all have similar garages. So they all have these old 2-car garages that you wouldn't normally expect. I mean, I think that was, I don't know if they, you know, it looked like they were all built around the same time, but you started to see, you know, a lot of the houses here maybe had really small 1-car garages, if they had a garage at all. But then you had this corridor where they've got, all of them pretty much have these historic 2-car garages. So it's just interesting when you walk around.
And McGregor was one of the 4 people who donated 30 acres
Exactly,
to
he
create
was,
the city
yeah.
of Moscow
This
to
is
begin
the,
with. Yeah,
I hadn't realized it, but.
this was his acre, that was his
Yeah.
section.
In
of
our
the-
family, we've
Yeah.
always felt bad about McGregor being forgotten because of the 4 people, Russell, his name's everywhere.
Llewellyn's
Deacon's
everywhere, and
yet
Deacon, yeah.
McGregor, so I'm really happy to hear about this. We ought to have a little trade around McGregor development. Cool.
So these are, you know, kind of the examples.
So what's that,
say,
1940s?
Post-war, is that what
1940s house?
That?
Wendy and
I
Nels.
think more 35.
30s,
Okay.
30, yeah, I'd say late 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, 40's the end of something,
Yeah.
and then the war. When we came back from the war, we changed
But these,
our whole.
but these guys had cars too.
What
These guys had cars too.
they did,
Yeah.
but they weren't big cars, and they didn't expect to. They weren't fat yet. We didn't have boom cars.
And then this is one I went back and, I don't know, this is in your, I think I updated it. There's a different area that we were calling Fort Russell before. I don't know where I got that from in 2010, but this is, I went back and expanded, so this is the entire new expanded Fort Russell Historic District. And so just going back and looking at that, the net density is 7.23, gross is 3.66. Of course, you know, you have all those, you know,
Institutional
institutional
places, yeah.
uses, you know, East City Park, schools, 1912 Center, churches, you know, scattered throughout, St. Mary's, got a, I guess it's St. Mary's on the
This is
outskirts,
so
but
much
you have
more
the church.
civilized than over there in McGregor.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, you know, there was some rules, and we, you know.
Well, the other interesting thing, when I was going back and forth with Mike, when I was first surprised about how low the density was, is when you look at the square blocks, which the core of Fort Russell has, they're neat, except that they really lower the density because you have a lot more intersections and street infrastructure
it is,
compared to
yeah.
the longer rectangular
Yeah.
blocks that you see right off City Park, right to the west of City Park. Those 3 that touch on Third have quite a bit higher density, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
And they're a lot, yeah, I mean, they're so much shorter, like these areas in here. I mean, our block length now is 600 feet is the limitation. And I bet
These
these, I
are
mean, you're probably
250,
200,
280.
between 2 and 300.
Yeah, yeah, they're.
So they're quite a bit smaller than what you
Well, the one thing
typically
that
see.
happens is that also when the houses that are in one direction on those blocks have almost no lot
Yeah.
too. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
they're right in the, I mean, if they're perpendicular to one another. Yeah.
So, yeah, we had 314 dwelling units here, it's about 85 acres, and then, once again, it's intermingled between single-family to multifamily to institutional. So the average lot size, so we've got another kind of smaller lot size, so 1,875, the maximum is 22,801, and then the mean is a little bit lower than the McGregor's. So that, McGregor's I think was around 9,000, this is about 7,600. So that's the typical, you know, R2 development, if you were to call it that, just because of the typical lot size, about 7,000 for R2.
Where's that 1875? That's
I think
tiny.
I know where it is. I think it's on
It's,
8th Street.
Yeah. I think
Oh,
Near
yeah,
Polk.
yeah, I know which one you mean.
Oh.
Yeah,
Could be
right,
that.
right near you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's, I think it's
Yeah.
this one.
Yep.
I mean, it could be, it's in the running, yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's
Because
what
I think
Yeah.
that, I'm really curious about that, I think that that was supposed to be with the one to the east of it, to match the one just to the
Yeah.
south.
Yeah.
And
Is that
that
right
somehow
across
it
the
was
street
split
from
off.
you?
It's right
It's
next
right
door.
next to me.
Huh?
Yeah, it's right
Yeah.
behind, to the west of her.
But I've always thought, I bet that used to,
It
and I don't know, I've heard
Yeah.
that it was a
Pretty
doctor's place, and maybe
surprising.
that was
Well,
like
they're-
the doctor's
Yeah.
office or something, and then split off before, when you could do
It's
that.
either-
I
it's
don't know.
either, yeah, that one, or there's
Always
another
wondered about
small one right there.
And
too.
then
Yeah.
Where's the big one, Michael? Which one do you think is that a giant one that's 22?
Well, there's a
You think
number
that
of
one
them.
on
They're
Hayes?
fairly, I mean, you got the
Yeah,
one here.
that is
there's-
a big,
there's
that's
some
a big
over-
house
some
too.
over
Yeah,
here
that's
that are-
Jane's lot there. She's
Oh,
got a double
yeah.
lot. We have a double lot. It's not that. It's but there, you can see on C Street and Polk, if you go in one lot, there's a really narrow lot. That house was relocated from the corner of C and Polk in 1926 when the house was built facing Polk. And so they moved it and they subdivided the lot and they made it a substandard lot. It's like 40 feet wide. So,
What's that on A and Van Buren, that big chunk
That's,
right there?
Kincaid's place, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah, that one is a
That's
big lot.
probably the
That's
big-
like a
that's probably
triple
the
lot.
big one, Yeah.
He-
Okay.
It's the Dave
Yeah.
mentioned there.
That must be
Yeah.
the big one,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, when you own a silver mine, you get bigger lots.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did exclude all the institutional uses, so that's not, it's all just the residential uses, so that those should be accurate. And then that's the kind of intermingling of the different uses. So the greens, the institutional uses, park, and then the yellows, the multifamily, and blues duplex. So as you go further west is where you start to get into more multifamily.
well, that's not a duplex, that blue on Polk and A. That's all right. I'll point
Oh,
it
is
out
that
later.
you?
Yeah. Last I
Oops,
knew.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, I'll have to change that. So that's just, yeah, example.
Wendy, do we get credit for morphology class studies tonight?
Yeah, I mean, this is what urban morphology is.
Right.
I love it.
Exactly, I know that too.
Yeah.
So this is, so in the same area as the villages, right across, kind of more of a shotgun house style, Camden Court. So it was part of that Southgate Third. They did a PUD, 2006, 13 dwelling units, 92,000 square feet. They're all single-family units. Minimum is 5,000, maximum 6,800, and the average is about 5,600. And this one's skewed a little off by a little bit, and I'll just show you in the picture, but net density is 7.69, gross is 6.1, and population is 13.74. So this one's a little odd just because the lots, I mean, you have the private drive, so these are private streets, but the lots actually extend all the way and encumber the streets as well. So they're actually, you know, on the ground a little bit less, so they probably should be a little bit higher density. You know, that would probably be maybe around 9, 10 dwelling units per acre. But yeah, that was just the configuration that they had done with the common areas and the common streets. And this is stormwater pond here that wasn't counted. But they're almost completed. It's taken a while, but I think they're down to maybe 2 lots. So this is from earlier this year. I think they're building, maybe it's one of these, and I think they've almost got constructed. I think maybe this one or this one are the only ones they have left to build. But yeah, this is a view from White Avenue, so they're more just a shotgun configuration. I think there's only 10 feet between these.
Those would be fairly tall houses on fairly small lots too, right?
Uh-huh, yeah.
I mean,
I think that the lot widths are only 40 feet, so they're fairly narrow. And then Green Acres, which is another PUD, and that's kind of by the bus barn over there, the Humane Society as well. So that's off of Bristol. But that was built or platted in 2007, 43 single-family units. A few of those are attached to more of a townhouse configuration. 229,000 square feet, so quite a bit smaller lot sizes. So the minimum here is about 1,500. The largest is 2,300, and the average is about 2,000. So really small lots. Net density, as you can imagine, is really high, 21.8. So just to give you an idea, I mean, apartment complexes are usually, if they're 3 stories, coming in at that 24 to 26.
but they have that
But
green
the-
space
yeah,
that makes it a
yeah.
cluster subdivision.
But the
in a way.
gross density is quite a bit less, and that's because of, all the streets and then the common open space and the common parking areas that they have throughout the subdivision. So, and they do have, this is intended to be more of an alley. So kind of a traditional design there, and these are rear-loaded with garages. They all have garages. Some of them are single, most of them are 2. A lot of the garages are tandem in configuration, so they're not side by side, it's one in front of the other. But then they have these areas where they have guest and visitor parking kind of intermingled throughout the development. And then, yeah, the common open space, they've got a playground structure, kind of a kiosk there at the intersection.
All intents and purposes, these are really row houses. Is it 5 feet between the houses, do you think? Or is it a little more than 5?
I think it's about 6 feet. I think it's, because building code requires at least 3 without additional fire separation, fire protection, and so I think they're about 6 between them. These are combined, so these on the outsides, these are more townhouses.
My point is that
Yeah.
the ones above, the fours could have just had fire separation by a firewall.
Yeah, they could,
And-
yeah,
and
townhouses.
There's, you have to ask yourself whether you gain anything by having a little 6-foot space.
Yeah, a little bit of
You might
light
have
maybe.
gotten a little more living space and then just parked.
Yeah,
Because the whole idea of having a row house with row houses don't work in the modern world unless you can have an alley behind it so that you can park. If you can park in a row house, you're happy. That's the way all of us are. We need, just like the people in identity, we all need a place to park.
Yeah, so all these, you can't park on the street on any of these, because I really haven't seen any.
you're not supposed to park on the street, and the reason for that is, fire department requires a 20-foot clear travel lane all the way around. So I know that people do, as in this picture, but you're not supposed to. A lot of times people just parallel park in front of their garages is what I've seen, but they do have quite a bit of visitor parking and, next to those units that they use. But yeah, these are more of the twin home townhouse style lots that are to the south. And then this is kind of looking up, looking at these units right here, looking from that point of view. and looking at those, and yeah, there's probably about 5-6 feet in between each of them.
So I wonder if there's windows on the walls, on the walls facing each other. Do you know? If
There are, but
Yeah.
not as many as you would like, I guess, or maybe you wouldn't want that many looking into somebody
Right,
else
no,
that
I was just
closely,
wondering,
so,
I'm kind of with Nels, I'm wondering if it's
Yeah.
really worth it.
Might as well
Yeah.
just push
Yeah,
it together,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
hard for me to see, you wouldn't want a window in that 6-foot space, and, and then you can hold hands with somebody in the building across the way. So you might as well, you get a little light. I don't know how many, are there any windows in those? I haven't gone over and looked at them. Are there any light source on the inside? I doubt it.
I don't know, I think there's a few windows, but not that many. I think that maybe like the bathrooms that have openable windows that come out onto those, but other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot of windows in between them.
Kind of a neat look. It's beguiling for the
It gives a
Idaho
place for
outback.
the snow to drop, so you can have
Yeah.
pitched roofs. And the icicles, well, they should be well insulated, so they don't have icicles
Yeah.
in the old houses.
So this is Tiempo, so once again, same neighborhood, out by the roundabout, 2007, 50 dwelling units. It's almost near, I think there's maybe 2 more lots, so they're being constructed right now, so it's nearing completion. But yeah, 50 units, 5.5 acres, all single family, minimum about 1,500 is the smallest, maximum is 3,200. And then about the average is 2,000, so almost the same ballpark as Green Acres as far as the lot sizes, pretty similar. And then about the same net density as well, so 21, gross density is way down again because even they have private streets which are quite a bit smaller, but still the common areas, this is all stormwater detention over here. There wasn't any parkland, so this whole area, there's no parkland required, primarily because it was satisfied by the Milton Arthur Park that they have pretty much developed now, off of, I think, Granville. And so there's no small pocket park within any of these, just because it was already satisfied with the larger neighborhood park, Milton Arthur. But yeah, essentially you have these private drives or private streets that go through, and they kind of developed this concept where they had the sidewalks and these internal corridors. So that's really the pedestrian. All the homes are facing each other. So this is the front of this home. This is the front of this home. There were a few of them that did so you go down the drive, and mostly what you're looking at with these units internally are just the garages. These are front loaded, so these all face the private road. These all face the private road. I think these all face the private road as well, but you have the ones that are on these internal islands that are all facing the common walkway.
So,
that's in between.
I should know this, but I've forgotten, or who do you think, this is pretty much all the Salisbury land, isn't it? And
Yeah.
who really inspired the creative effort on all this development? I think that this is the most, I'm not saying every one of these are just perfect or anything like that, but these are unusual ways of getting density and unusual ways of, little different ways of living that isn't your standard deal with 8,000 square foot lot and a little house in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so who do you think inspired that? Who was the guiding light that made that
Well, it's funny
happen?
because they're all different developers. It used to be Ron King, and they were out of Spokane.
Yeah.
They ended up developing
That's what I
that,
thought.
but it was during a time, I think you had a lot of this kind of innovative development around the same time. It was 2006, 2007, and then you had the big crash. So what happened with a lot of these, like Tiempo, there wasn't a whole lot of homes being built for a number of years, and they barely just started picking back up steam within the last few years, and they really just,
You think it was people out of Spokane? though, that we're working on?
That was the developer, original developer, and they ended up selling the majority of the lots for really cheap. But over the years, I mean, they've really gone up from what they were. I mean, they've rebounded, and now I think the average home cost for one of these smaller homes in here is around 230,000. I mean, they've really jumped up from what they were before. They were selling lots, I believe, at one time for 15,000, 20,000. And, but they're all essentially developed now. I think there's one twin home being built right here. But
I
they,
saw one listed the other day for 275
wow,
on Main Spring.
yeah. So really, I mean, it took a while, and they went through a couple different owners, but I mean, it really finished strong over the last few years. And there's a different, they did multiple PUD amendments. They did a PUD amendment to allow twin homes, even though none were built. I think this was the first one that's being constructed right now, so there'll only be one twin home in there, and that'll be right here. They tried this L configuration for a while, and I don't think that one took off very well, as also just because you're no matter how you cut it, you're looking at somebody else's window, or
Well,
I mean,
I've
it's
seen
just kind of the
in
interaction.
subdivisions in Portland, like, on some of those transit-oriented developments where they stagger the houses in what they look at when they're that close together,
Yeah.
so that you have privacy in your little yard space and your neighbor doesn't look in, But it takes coordination between the.
Well, the idea
designs.
here was they took 3 lots, put them into 2 in the L-shaped configuration, and it's just single-story houses. So it was more of the rancher, trying to
Yeah.
cater more towards a retiree that maybe just wanted a ranch or single-story. But the remainder of the other homes here are 2-story, so that they were just trying a different development form
I
to see
see.
if that was an option.
Given the density, that density, you'd think they would really be anxious to have a little neighborhood shopping something there. That would be the little red spot, Joel, that we've always dreamed about. I mean, you'd think there are enough people here who were walking around that they'd be delighted to have a coffee shop or a little restaurant or something in the area, just to give it a little. And I don't mean to take anything away from downtown Moscow, but
Well, neighborhood commercial.
You know,
Oh, yeah, just-
whatever we-
Yeah.
we
And the
They had the
slurp and burp
burp.
out there.
there you have
It went out before maybe it should have.
I know.
Probably would have been pretty successful.
Right.
It's a daycare
That's
now,
true.
but it is its own neighborhood business out there at the Slurp and Burp. So they're operating a daycare now, but I think that may be more lucrative as we continue to grow out this way. Who knows? Maybe something like that would pop up. But it is zone neighborhood business, the Slurp and Burp parcel. So yeah.
Well, it just seems that the intriguing thing to me is watching our little 2 towns, Moscow and Pullman, grow. And because of the university in Pullman having so much money and getting so big, they've done things that we haven't done. In other words, they have little neighborhood things out where the students live. But you just wonder, at what point does a town become a little city? In other words, at what point does a village become a town? We've been just always this one thing, and then and it'll probably be just after I die, but it seems like inch by inch, there's gonna be neighborhoods formed on the edge of town, not to compete with downtown, but just that kind of thing. I've always felt we should have a coffee shop in the Elysium. There's a couple spots there where I'd love to have a coffee shop around the corner instead of having to go downtown. But as you look at this, it's just intriguing, and I find it's really it's pretty exciting to have people trying to live in slightly different ways. So this is a good lesson. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, this was our continuing ed session today.
Right, exactly.
Because we really got a lesson. I think you really put it together nicely to show what the numbers say, what the plan shows, and then how it translates three-dimensionally. I mean, I think all of that really helps
Yeah.
to visualize what density means. Because
Yeah, it's hard
density
to,
by
yeah,
itself
yeah.
scares people,
Yeah.
but when you see how it manifests, it's
And it's interesting too to see just how long it takes for people to get, for trees and such to start to show. How long it, we have this wonderful stuff in Fort Russell that is been here for so many years, but it takes a while to get
Well, if you look
growth
at
pattern.
you look at some of those early photos, black and white photos of Fort Russell, and they
Yeah,
got trees
exactly.
that look like this.
they had great views of
you know,
Moscow Mountain from Fort
Yeah.
Russell
I know.
back in
I
1910.
actually think you could probably have seen our house from
Right.
downtown
Right. Yeah, probably
in the
so.
early days.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been a tree inside, and
Yeah.
because they didn't plant trees around our house until 15 or 20 years after the house was built. No one planted a tree. I mean, 1889 planted a tree, you gotta be kidding, you know? And then all of a sudden, I'm living in a forest. Well, not all of a sudden, 100 years later.
So this is the two-story kind of belly band design of these Tiempo homes.
Belly band?
Belly band is that horizontal
Is the
line that
horizontal.
defines the first and
That's
second
kind
floor
of the defining
separation.
characteristic that a lot of them have, is that belly band between the two.
It's probably to break up the massive massing.
yeah. Cheap way to break up the
Right.
massing. And so the opposite end of the spectrum, so this is multifamily. So this is out Peterson first. It's been developed, I just had an old photo, but now they have apartment complexes on the other side as well. But it should come out to be about the same density. Just because when you have three-story apartments and you got the parking, it almost always comes out to be about 24 to 26 units per acre. But this was first platted in 2003, 265 dwelling units for the developed area. Study area is 11.9 acres, net density is 24.7, gross is 22, population's about 50 per acre.
That's about the max, isn't it? With our parking, 24 is probably right at the edge of.
That's about it. I mean, if you have surface parking and you go 3 stories for the
Yeah.
buildings, that's almost always what
Then
you
you've got
what you come
have
out
money
to.
to be able to park under parking.
Lift up here, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what most of the buildings look like. So surface parking, 3 stories.
It's called Copycat City.
Then we go back, so I kind of circled back around to take a look at some other areas that were more traditional. And so this is that area, it's 3 blocks directly west of East City Park here, to try to break it out a little more. I mean, these are a little bit more just single family, although there are some 2-family and multifamily in there. But looking up, what we had a little bit greater density than what we had in the entire Fort Russell. So this is about 12 acres, 66 units, mixture, minimum lot size that we see here about 3,900, maximum is 12,000, and the average is about 7,000. So this is almost like what we had in the villages, that development. But net density is 8.78, gross is 5.4, and population is 12.15. But yeah, this is primarily just the traditional, streets. We've got alleys.
What streets are those, Mark?
That's along Third.
It's Howard.
Right, yeah. Right next to City Park, which is
Yeah.
East City Park.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Polk, Van
Yeah.
Buren,
I get it.
Howard.
I got
Yeah.
it.
And this should be the mixture of uses. We've got some multifamily in there. some duplexes, but majority is single family. And then just taking a look at the area. This is East City. This is Lena Whitmore. So these are the few blocks north of that. So you're starting to. I mean, this is probably post 1950s
Yeah.
development. So that there's no
It's a single-story development.
primarily single
Yeah.
story, single family. We ditched the alleys now. So there's really
Alley
no-
went
really
away and
al-
sidewalks went away all at the same time.
Yeah, they kind of go away. A lot of times you just have sidewalks maybe on one side of the street if you have them at all. Primarily single family. Couple duplexes intermingled there. So 80 dwelling units, 21.5 acres, single two. Minimum's about 6,500, maximum's 24,000, and the average is 9,300. So it looks like they are a lot smaller lots, but they're not. I mean,
It's just that the
it's
houses
actually-
cover
just-
more.
Yeah,
Cover more of the lot,
Yeah.
yeah, because they're single-story, yeah,
and they're fairly deep, and we cut the alley out, and
yeah.
all of a sudden your density
Right, and
goes
not so
goes
many
down.
two-story houses as we have in
Right.
Fort Russell.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comparison, though, just to see what the
Yeah.
house type,
But the
does.
density, I mean, we jump from about cut that in half
yeah,
from what we had in those 3 blocks west of East City
Mhm.
Park.
right.
So that's, yeah, like you said, kind of
Mm-hmm.
single story.
And the house, instead of gable end facing the street, it switches to ridge line facing the street, and it
Yeah.
just takes more lot,
Yeah.
a wider lot to
True,
do that,
yeah.
yeah.
So this is just kind of recapping on what we looked at. And then wanted to just kind of touch briefly on the street standards. So we talked about, in this traditional neighborhood design and even clustered design, I think that, maybe we want to, the streets were a lot narrower back then than they are now. And how that plays into what our allowances are with traditional neighborhoods. I think we'll have to probably have that discussion about whether or not we have another street standard that's narrower than what we currently have. So these are kind of local neighborhood street standards right now. And really the only opportunity to deviate from these is just at the council level. So the council is able to pretty much issue a variance for these requirements, but they're the only body that they're able to do that. But you have essentially 2 10-foot travel lanes with parallel parking on both sides of the street. Travel lanes are 10 feet, parking's 8 feet in width. So you're looking at a total street width from curb to curb, which is 36 feet. We have an alternate local street standard with just parking on one side of the street with 2 10-foot travel lanes, 8-foot wide parallel, and the total parking there is 28, or the total width of the roadway is 28 feet. So you start to look around. So this is the area west of East City, Howard Street. We got parking on both sides of the street, and it's 30 feet. So about 6 feet, less than what our current street standard would allow in that area. Blaine Street, I think parking on both sides of the street again. So this is the area north of Lena Whitmore, kind of the same dimension. So we're about 6 feet less in width there. And then you get to some of these other areas like 7th Street. This is 22 feet, and we have parking on one side of the street.
Traffic calming.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially. I mean, you make these wide streets, and all of a sudden you have a raceway. And,
In fact, I can say firsthand that you can run through your neighborhood right in the middle of the street most of the
can,
time,
yeah.
because I do it a lot.
These are also streets where there's a small number of people parked. So you end up sort of weaving your way down the street slowly, but
You do, yeah. You have,
but it's
yeah.
a weaving pattern.
Yeah. A lot of times, just somebody's coming, you have to wait for them or
Yeah.
proceed.
It
But-
doesn't work if the parking is more utilized.
Yeah. And I live on 7th, and it was, you know, this winter it was a challenge just because you have some cars that don't move and then they get plowed in, and then you end up with barely enough room to get by on just the, you know, essentially becomes a one-way almost, and there's barely enough room.
And it's hard to
by.
get out of driveways too.
Right.
I mean, I
You
can,
don't- yeah.
it's really hard to get out of the driveways.
Probably
when the
didn't have
berm's
many
up.
people speeding through.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, I mean, it's you just feel uncomfortable speeding through when you're that close, you know, with kids that could potentially run out from cars, and it just, you know, really just kind of
Closes the corridor
slows
down,
things
and then the
down.
tree canopy
Yeah.
that it reinforces it. And,
So,
yeah.
yeah, 28, so we're about, you know, in all these examples, about 6 feet less than our street standard right now.
And does the fire
Allow.
department have a hard time putting out, well, except for the magnets in-house, I guess didn't work out so well, but, I mean, is it, because really our street standards are determined by
A lot of that is what.
the fire
yeah,
marshal.
yeah, yeah.
And you kind of wonder how all these neighborhoods survived for 120 years with
Yeah.
narrow streets, you know,
Yeah, I hear you.
so.
And then 8th, block down, a little bit wider, so parking on one side still, and then 24 feet instead of the 28 that we currently have, so.
Interesting.
I was gonna do a little bit more research on standards in other jurisdictions to see if we had, I know that, I wanted to say when we were going through our street standards before, that we had looked at, just in community development, another kind of a local neighborhood street standard that was a little bit different than what we have, but, we could kind of get a little cross-section to see what
Great.
other places do. But-
That would be great. Well, is that it, or?
Yeah, it is.
That
So,
was
I mean,
wonderful.
just-
Good.
Yeah, very instructional. So I guess, I don't know what else is left there. Oh, Joel, do you have
I won't take much time. The last transportation meeting was 2 weeks ago. The main topic of interest was what to do with the Third Street bicycle lane design as we approach the, Washington Street. We still don't have an agreement with the state relative to what we wanted to do there. The Transportation Commission opinion was that we should bring the bicycle lanes down to, at least to our bicycle storage facility,
Yeah.
and perhaps, well, as to whether or not we intrude on the state right-of-way, there are some options being developed that might not.
okay.
The next meeting is in 2 weeks, and I have not seen the agenda yet.
All right, any other announcements? Brandy, did you want to say anything about the parking? Or is that more of a small meeting, or?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just, have arranged, just kind of thinking forward to parking concerns coming from lots of different angles. I know I reached out to Wendy just as the chair here because of the comment about some of the overflow parking concerns with the identity. And so I'm just personally trying to educate myself on different options and looking comprehensively, and I think there's a lot of interest in doing that among the council and with the mayor also. And so I am meeting with a company that does the meters on campus just to learn more about what those costs are, what they're capable of. It's very different than meters used to be, as far as you can be notified where there are open spaces at that any given moment. Enforcement can be notified on the spot when a meter's expired. And so I'm just gathering some more information at this point. So
Okay,
be
yeah.
free to, invite other people along. I mean, the I asked Tyler
Michael
Palmer,
Kite,
who's
right.
the acting public works director now. He's actually going to be traveling during that time, but he may be able to call in, and so I just reached out to you, and also Michael Kite as transportation. Just thinking, and I don't know that it needs to be a real big
Oh,
thing at this point
yeah, I
because
wasn't
it's
sure what
so
the-
early, and it's really
Yeah.
just trying to better understand what options are out there if and when we are ready to try to talk about some changes.
Great, thank you. Any other?
Well, the parking has to do with the educational institutions downtown too. And you've got that survey, which there's some sitting here,
Mhm.
that will be at city council, you'll be talking about it at city council.
That's true, yeah.
So since we're televised, I think it's good to put out there, if you're interested in that, it will be on city council's agenda.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
So come.
Yeah, there's not directly a parking question, but
They're related.
There's
some relationship there.
Mike, have you had any progress on identity as far as a parking problem, like the fence that you're gonna ask them to put up? Have they contacted you, or where do we stand on that? Just the same?
Yeah, I think they're still making progress. I think the last time Chuck came, they were still trying to work on the zip cars that were supposed to be there. So those have come, they're stationed just east of the Pizza Hut. And so there are a couple Nissan Leafs, I think is what they are.
Okay.
So they had to run electrical to those because they're electrical cars. And so they've got that. I had talked to their development director a couple times, and he said they were working with Chuck on putting that fence up.
Oh, great. Good.
So I'll have to call Chuck and see what the status of that is, but I haven't seen a fence permit come in, so
No, there's
I
no
haven't,
fence
I haven't
around.
seen anything come up.
I saw Chuck and he is out of town he might have been here tonight, but he said he will be here next.
Yeah, I don't think
Keep
there's
us,
anything been done
informed.
yet. I don't think he's talked to anybody yet. I
I
talked to him a
don't,
couple days ago.
I don't think it'll solve itself, and I don't think there's an immediate solution, but I'm convinced that it will solve itself in the next year or two. It's gonna take just a little while for the students, once they've made a commitment. In other words, whoever rents the apartment just tells the student, hey, no problem, there's parking, blah, blah, blah. You don't know what they said, we have no idea. But the students are gonna figure out that there's an issue here, and now I'm gonna have to.
Well, through social media, et cetera,
Right.
as they're evaluating
Yeah, with
places
people
to
moving out too,
leave,
because they
yeah.
don't have parking places.
Yeah,
Couple of them are.
if they need parking and they can't get one, that's
And-
probably not a
and
good place for them
I
to
And Chuck
live.
is towing them now too. He gives them
Yeah.
2 warnings and then he's over with the good guy thing. And so that might help.
Right, that will help, but I think
Yeah.
also the way the development was promoted to us as
That's a good
being.
presentation. It is what it is, yeah.
Catering to the alternative student,
Yeah.
metro-oriented student, and then not really seeing that type of tenant being, inhabiting the place in general. I think there's a problem there that needs to be fixed through management, and
Yeah.
it's a little hard for us to fix.
Right?
Yeah, so,
Good.
anyway, okay, I guess that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.